On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the largest amphibious invasion in history. But on one particular stretch of French coastline, a place codenamed Omaha, the perfect plan for a quick victory, completely fell apart. It turned into a desperate, bloody fight for every inch of sand. This is the story of that day. Just try to imagine you're one of those men. It's not even dawn yet. You're freezing, you're seasick, and you are absolutely terrified. You can hear the shells from your own navy screaming over your head, and you're pointed directly at one of the most brutal killing grounds of the entire Second World War. The whole assault was scheduled to kick off at 6.3. In military terms, they call that hour. For the men in the first wave about to hit Omaha Beach, it would be the longest and, without a doubt, the most terrifying moment of their lives. The very second the ramps on those landing craft went down, the German defenders, who were supposed to have been wiped out by bombs, unleashed an absolute storm of machine gun fire. The men at the front? They were just cut down instantly. The guys behind them had to climb over the bodies of their friends just to get into the fight, jumping into chest-deep water that was already turning red with blood. You know, stories like this one from private sales are what make the history so real. It's not just about maps and tactics. It's the raw human experience of pure chaos. He only survived by collapsing behind a small ridge of stones, just wondering how anyone could possibly make it out of there alive. It's almost unimaginable, right? So you have to ask yourself, why? Why were they even there? To really get a handle on the carnage on that beach, we've got to zoom out and look at what was happening in the world in 1944. Why was this invasion, with all its awful risks, seen as absolutely essential? By 1944, the war had been raging for nearly 5 long years. Nazi Germany still had a death grip on almost all of mainland Europe, and over on the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union was locked in this titanic, bloody struggle, losing millions of people. The Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, was practically begging the Allies to open up a second front in the West to take some of the pressure off. The entire fate of the war was hanging in the balance. And the answer to that plea was Operation Overlord, a military operation on a scale that's just hard to even wrap your head around. The plan was to land over 150,000 men on 5 beaches along the Normandy coast, all in a single day. If it worked, they'd get that crucial foothold in Europe. But if it failed, well, the war could drag on for years, and the losses would be just catastrophic. And just think about the weight on one man's shoulders. The Supreme Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, made the final call to go on June 6th, even though the weather was terrible. And then he went and privately wrote this note, ready to take full responsibility if it all went wrong. It's just a stark reminder of the immense pressure and what was personally at stake. You know, the planners of D-Day had this incredibly detailed, step-by-step strategy for taking Omaha Beach. But there's an old saying in the military, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And at Omaha, it seemed like everything that could possibly go wrong did. On paper, it looks like a solid plan. You'd have a massive aerial and naval bombardment that would just pulverize the German fortifications. Then, these special amphibious tanks would hit the beach first, giving the infantry immediate cover. It was all designed to clear that beach fast and keep casualties to a minimum. But here's where you see a complete cascading failure. The bombers, they missed completely. Their bombs landed miles inland because of cloud cover. The naval guns? They barely scratched the concrete bunkers. The rough seas swallowed most of the amphibious tanks, sending them straight to the bottom. And maybe worst of all, Allied intelligence was just wrong. The German division defending that beach was a battle-hardened unit, way tougher than anyone had predicted, and the men being thrown into this meat grinder were a mix of hardened veterans and troops who were completely green. You had the 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, who had fought their way across North Africa and Sicily, and right alongside them you had the 29th Infantry Division, a National Guard unit that had trained for years but had never seen a single day of combat. For thousands of them, this would be their first day of battle and their last. And this is what they were up against. The Atlantic Wall. At Omaha Beach, it was a perfectly designed killing field. German machine guns were placed in concrete bunkers up on these high bluffs, with interlocking fields of fire that created a web of death covering every single inch of sand. The men had to cross hundreds of yards of open beach while being fired on from above. By mid-morning, the situation was a catastrophe. There were thousands of casualties. Troops were still pinned down at the water's edge, and commanders offshore were actually considering abandoning the landing altogether. But then, on the beach itself, something remarkable started to happen. Individual courage began to turn the tide. The whole turning point is pretty much summarized in this one brutal quote from Colonel George Taylor. He saw his men, just paralyzed by fear, huddled behind a seawall. He knew that staying put meant certain death. The only chance they had to survive was to move forward, to attack. His words, "Let's get the hell off this beach," got men moving. Look, victory here wasn't the result of some big revised plan from the top. No way. It was pieced together by countless individual acts of bravery. Navy destroyers were scraping their holes on the seafloor to get close enough to blast German bunkers. Officers like General Norman were walking up and down the beach under fire, rallying men and leading charges. Small, leaderless groups of soldiers found weaknesses and started scaling the cliffs. It was a victory won from the bottom up. Just a little ways west of Omaha, the U.S. Army Rangers were on their own impossible mission at a place called Point du Hoc. Their job was to scale these sheer 100-foot cliffs under constant fire to destroy massive German guns, only to get to the top and discover the guns had already been moved. Faulty intelligence had sent them on a near-suicide mission. Their bravery was just incredible. But the cost was staggering for an objective that wasn't even there. By the end of the day, against all odds, the Americans had secured a fragile foothold on Omaha Beach. The invasion hadn't failed. But that victory came at a horrific price, one that's measured in thousands of lives. Just look at this number, 2,400. That's the estimated human cost for a single day on a single beach. 2,400 American casualties. It was the highest of any of the 5 D-Day beaches, a devastating toll that cemented Omaha's nickname, Bloody Omaha. And if you want to understand the sheer intensity of that first assault, just look at this statistic. Company A of the 116th Infantry was effectively wiped out within 10 minutes of their ramp dropping, a 96% casualty rate. It's almost impossible to even comprehend the violence of those first few moments. Today, if you visit that now peaceful beach, you'll find the American cemetery overlooking the sand. Each one of those more than 9,000 white crosses and stars of David represents a life cut short, a son, a husband, a father who never made it home. It stands as this permanent, silent testament to the sacrifice made on that sand. The battle for Omaha Beach was a victory and an absolutely essential one for freeing Europe from Nazi tyranny. But when you look back at the chaos, the failures, and the staggering loss of life, it forces you to ask a pretty profound question. It reminds us all that freedom is never free, and sometimes its price is almost too terrible to bear.